All right, so let's get started. We're gonna do this. Starting this is kind of to start developing a little bit more communication with you guys. I feel like this is a slightly different format than we do with the general Zoom updates, but I wanted it to be a lot more interactive, where we can get, you guys have a chance to speak directly and start, discussing or asking questions about anything that we're currently working on. So I guess I can just start with a basic update of what's been happening, and then we can go from there and just open it up to questions. I believe you should be able to unmute yourself. This is the first time I've done this particular type of video chat, but we'll see.
Hey there, guys. Colin, everybody else.
There we go. We can hear. All right. Hey. Cool. Okay, you guys can chat. Perfect.
Cool idea doing this, guys.
Yeah. I figured this would be nice to get everybody kind of in a group together, make it more interactive. We've done the YouTubes before, but that's not as interactive, and we've been having to like pull questions from here or there to try to aggregate it. So this, if you guys like this forum, we can do this, frequently or more frequently. If as frequently as weekly, if you guys would want. Maybe as infrequently as quarterly, but I think it would be, I've been feeling it. I feel like it'll be good for all of us to kind of see each other, talk to each other. And that changes the vibe of things too, when everyone's behind keyboards, it's easy to, not necessarily recognize, the humanity of each other. So let's start with, last night, I've been working on some bugs. As you saw, I talked about the precision T class. What that basically is I've been having to emulate decimals with integers. So we already have done that inside Nexus. Like, we don't store floating point values because floating point, to spare you too many details, but it's an approximation of a decimal, right? So when you have floating point values, that's what you have to use in order to do, a calculation, let's say, 0.3 times 5 or whatever. That requires, either a double or a float. So what I've managed to do, let's see if I can dip this down a little bit. What I've managed to do is create a class to do this. So essentially what it does is it emulates decimals, but it uses only integers. And that's something that's really important for when we're having, precise financial applications. A lot of times you have to do that if you're dealing with, to have, a significant number of figures that is accurate. You don't have all these rounding errors. And also we have a set number of figures required for each specific token. And so you a lot of times will have mixed figure calculations, right? Such as, 3.33, plus 5.87375, right? And, those represented in integer values are, different numbers. So I wrote this class just to make it, I was trying to speed it up to get it done as quickly as possible. So there's one peer-to-peer marketplace. And based on that, I essentially needed, I've been futzing with that calculation over and over again for about a month. Like, I think it's like, hey, this is not working. So I had to essentially go, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to just do this right. I'm going to write a class to handle this all internally so that I can have different types that can handle mixed figures. So that's what the precision T class is. It's only about 800 lines of code. I wrote it last week, or it would be this week, actually, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So it took about 2 or 3 days. So it's not a very bad piece of code to do, but it was also is fun. I've been having fun with it. If anybody doesn't know, we do have to use floating points for our calculations for the emission, such as the subsidy reserves. If anybody's familiar with that, how we have the release reserves. And essentially what that requires is, to use some sort of floating point. So what I created or utilized was a soft float. So we already do integer virtualization of floating point values. That's an important part. And we already have had that essentially put in since pretty much network launch. Hold on, I'm going to bring this umbrella back. I think that should satiate the sun. Okay, that's a bit better. Sweet. So we've already had floating points that we've had to deal with. So we're using already integer values to virtualize our floating point values. If anybody remembers the Raspberry Pi, why we couldn't get it to compile and work on the Raspberry Pi, that was it, floating points. So we essentially already have that in there, but a floating point isn't an actual value that you're storing verbatim. It's just a, an E to the X essentially. And then it chooses an X value that approximates it to the closest decimal value. So this is different than that. It's just a pure, precise. That's why I called it precision T. So you can set your fixed number of figures, and then that'll also help, because inside the JSON parsing, in order to obtain a floating point, you have to use a double, right? A standard floating point. And so that it can cause slight variations in the values. So this I'm going to be plugging into our JSON library and piping that whole thing in so that we use our precision T class as the type internally to that, so that when you're doing things like operators, let's say, this is something that Arun, Aon-wise found, is that, if you're doing an operator and you're adding up all the account balances per se for a certain token, it doesn't necessarily retain the number of significant figures correctly, and it doesn't render it correctly. It's been a big pain in the butt to just even get it to where it is now before the precision T class, to get those values to render correctly just using floating points. So I just decided, okay, I need to do this right. I need to make it solid. So I wrote a class for it. And like I said, it only took a few days, so it wasn't too far out of the way. And then I ran into another bug. Everything was pretty much ready to wrap like a week or two ago. And then I did the last change to the precision T, or before precision T, to the market, and I passed it back to Mike and Arun, Aon-wise, and to get them to do final testing. And then the node crashed, and there was a bunch. I was like, oh God, like it felt like it was going backwards. But what happened was that I created an optimization so that we don't have to recalculate the transaction ID hash over and over and over again. And that optimization basically stores it inside the transaction object. But it wasn't resetting that cache when I was reading events. And so we're just getting a bunch of bunk events that were, causing a lot of issues. So I solved that last night. And that was actually the core of pretty much all of my bug lists, right? So it's pretty much ready. I'm waiting right now. I've passed it back to Aon-wise and Mike to do, their additional tests. And it seems to be fairly stable. I essentially just have to pipe in the precision T class, and then I just have to run through the LLP and just do a little bit of tidying up in the LLP to make sure all the client mode stuff is piped in. And I mean, it's ready to go pretty much. That's it. There was like the indexing issue, if you guys saw, Sohan had, that's fixed now too. So we're pretty close. We're really close. So I'm getting to the point where I'm, finishing up these testing cycles, and then I'm passing them over, and I'm going to most likely start on 5.2 fairly soon, because we're going to have probably a 1 or 2 beta cycles in the mobile wallet before we get that ready to submit into the App Store. And then we're also working on some other optimizations, such as, bootstrapping in the binary, so that you can download the wallet and it'll sync up really quickly, and you don't have to go through the whole syncing process, which can take, a bit of time, especially even with the chain as it is now. So everything's been looking good. I mean, it's been a little, I wouldn't say it's too much slower. I mean, I've been spending a lot of time over the last few years kind of developing all these things like precision T, and this framework, as you saw, Kendall made some documentation for it, that makes it easier for us to do these things in the future. And Kendall now is able to just deploy new APIs just like that. And it's essentially preliminary object modeling that's put into there. So it's a static object modeling. So you basically just define this object, and then you plug it into all these template methods, and it just runs. It got a new API. Where prior to that, you would generally have to do a lot of copying and pasting of code, and then you have to modify some of the values. It's all templated and plugged in, so it's a really beautiful engine right now. And one of the reasons you want to do that is it sets us up for dynamic object modeling. So on the 5.2 release, you'll be able to actually say, hey, I have this object, I've created it, let's say it's an Arizona title, right? And you'll have a specific object format for that title. And then you'll be able to declare, the name of that object, and then import that into an API dynamically. So in order to add new objects to an API, you won't have to release a new binary. It'll all start to be managed on the chain. And that's the first step towards being able to manage our state on chain, so that, eventually when we have, the need to change block size or any of these other values, they can be dynamically updated because it'll bootstrap it from the chain itself, right? So a lot of the work, like I said, it's like bamboo. A lot of the work's, there, and it feels pretty solid. There's just, minor little bug tweaks. I mean, I told you last I checked the code base, it was, I think, close to what's 70 or 80,000 lines that have been changed. I mean, that counts blank lines. Unfortunately, that's just how Git manages. So it's a little over 50% of the code base has been completely redone. In a completely new way too. And it actually, I've deleted tens of thousands of lines of code, but added tens of thousands of lines of code. So it's a little bit more code than it was before, even though I've made so many massive optimizations and templated everything so that there's not much copying and pasting. That means that it's very dense and it has lots and lots and lots of features packed into it with not as much code. So it's looking really good. I'd say, keep your eye out for the next betas. Will be probably, I'd guess, next week or two. We should be able to start. I'm going to be working with Kendall to get some builds done next week. And testing out the client mode stuff. That's what I'm essentially doing next week. I've been going through all of my bug fixes this last week to get the private hybrid mode working pristinely, which includes DEX and all those other things. Because Mike from Beth is actually, he's got like a green bond carbon auction system and then a carbon credits trading platform and stuff. So he's built a whole marketplace with the 5.1. So it's there. It's there and it's working. And I even created like a templated contract system too. So you can create like this boilerplate contract, and then there's a build function. So you can essentially build these standard contracts now inside of it. And so the next update, I'll be adding the domain specific language, which will allow you to kind of type conditional contracts out in a more, normal, English based language rather than this binary language. So that's pretty much what's been going on off the top of my head. I guess we can open it up now if you guys, have any questions, whatever questions that you want to start asking, just, I guess, shoot, you can drop them in the Telegram channel. I'm monitoring that right now. And, or you can just speak. You guys should be able to unmute, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. So, anybody got any questions? What's going on? It can be anything. It doesn't have to just be Nexus related. If you guys got questions about, we're in strange times. It was kind of funny at Anarchapulco, just a little non sequitur. My last speech that I did at Anarchapulco was basically like, yo guys, we gotta get some stuff done because we're at war. I don't know if you realize it, but we're at war. It's a psychological war right now, but it will go kinetic if we're not careful. And then, like, literally as that speech was going on, Russia was invading Ukraine. So we're at a very, very interesting time. The pipeline's getting blown up. Germany. I feel for you guys in Europe. Inflation's through the roof. Netherlands is 17% per month. So this is definitely the time that we built all of this stuff for, right? Like I said, as these conventional currencies get more volatile, I think that will help, in bridging those adoption gaps. I don't necessarily see Bitcoin is being utilized as a currency just because of the fee models. And there's central bank digital currencies they're trying to push now. Was interesting that, they're planning on using Ethereum. I did have a little bit of like, how could this play out before, until I saw that they're going to use Ethereum, and I'm just like, oh, okay. Cool. Have fun with that. We're cool. I don't think their plots, quote unquote, are as effective as they're hoping them to be. Look at the monkeypox, right? The smallpox stuff. If you guys have ever heard the story, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, we're there. The people aren't going for it anymore. And I don't know, with the whole, quote unquote World War III stuff. Dude, look at it. People don't want to fight anymore. You have to have willing populations to fight. There may be scuffles, there may be people are not willing to fight each other anymore. That's what I'm saying is, despite all of this, there's a lot of unity that's beginning to find the people. It's such a strange time to be alive because there's so many things that could possibly be bad or go wrong. But I don't know. I feel like I feel God's hand in this in some way, you know, like, I mean, look at the COVID stuff. I mean, it really was a massive backfire. You know, the virus mutated to be not quite so deadly anymore. And it didn't really have the death, you know, toll that they had hoped. And part of the reason I believe is because they tested it on prisons, which, you know, vitamin D and zinc deficiencies is one thing that caused a lot of, you know, massive death rates. I mean, you know, Eric Clapton's hand went numb, you know, after, you know, taking some of the vaccines. So there's some really interesting things. Like I'm seeing a lot of these quote unquote agendas that, you know, these perceived agendas that are trying to be played out. It's not like it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, there was a lot more people that were asleep and defending the narratives. Now it's just, I don't know. I wouldn't say I have hope, because I think hope is bad magic. Hope is, you know, it's like hope is waiting for someone to do something. You know, I have faith because like I don't know exactly what the solution is for everything here. I know what I need to do in it, but I have faith that it's all for the better. And if you look, I mean, I've never seen so many people wake up in my entire life. I mean, this is the time we've all been waiting for those of you that have been, you know, awakened and seeing, you know, all these issues. This is the time we've been waiting for. And, you know, it's time. Like, it's time to utilize it. It's time to get out there in the world and help people, show people what we can do, right? And that's why I'm getting back in the lab now too, which is cool. Getting the hydrogen stuff going. That's been sitting on a shelf pretty much since I started Nexus. And I'm working on some electrical propulsion systems too, because the ideal scenario with the satellites, right, would be to have, you know, the ability for them to launch themselves. We need decentralized launch capacity. So I've been working on, you know, electrical propulsion systems, studying certain electrical effects, and, you know, getting that will be really important. And then the secondary dimension to that too is, you know, radiation protection. You know, when you create certain fields, electromagnetic fields, we might be able to protect that hardware a bit more too. So, you know, what I'm working on is trying to lower this barrier of entry into the satellites themselves, right? You know, how can we launch them much more efficiently and quickly? And, you know, like if we rely on centralized launch capacity, that will get us shut down, because we're in direct competition to Starlink, and now that would be T-Mobile, right? So, you know, why are you going to let us launch our own? We have to have our own launch capacity, and not just using things like spin launch or, you know, the high velocity launches, but I'm talking like having our own propulsion systems. I think chemical propulsion systems are archaic and of the past, and one of the biggest issues with them is you have to carry the weight of the fuel, right? You have to constantly, you have this little small narrow margin of your thrust that can be the payload, because most of the horsepower in the rocket is going to carry the fuel to power it, right? So you have this kind of circular dependency that really, I think, limits, you know, the capabilities. And I think chemical fuel, I mean, it works. It has worked. You know, a rocket's a controlled explosion. And the other problem is that they're considered international arms. So since you could put explosives on a rocket, it could become a missile. So you're actually considered an arms dealer when you develop rockets, even if you're dropping things into low Earth orbit. So, you know, those are some of the many reasons that I've kind of strayed away from, you know, particularly focusing on the rockets. That's not to say that the Phantom's not potentially going to still use the operating system. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't been in contact with them much lately, but, you know, the operating system's open source, so, you know, anyone will be able to utilize it. So I know that that's something that we were discussing a lot as part of the strategic partnership. But, you know, the launch capacity, that's something that I'm really working on right now. That's where I'm getting in the lab, and, you know, having our own self-sustainability, right? Like, my faith lies in ourselves, right? And our ability to take things in our own hands, and to know that, like, what we need will be provided for, you know, and looking at things in that way. Instead of looking at, why is this happening? This is so bad. Be like, well, what is it that I'm being taught right now? What is it that's being presented to me that I need to learn? What is it about myself that, and my way of thinking, that is in error? What do I need to correct about that? Why are these things happening? And we start looking at life that way, we start to actually be able to see and receive, you know, all these blessings that come, and sometimes they come in disguise. They come, you know, with in the dark shadows, you know, and some of the greatest gifts actually come in the shadows. And, you know, that's why a lot of people will never really realize them, is because, you know, they're too scared to look in those, you know. So, yeah, it's just a little spiel. I'm going to look at some of the questions now. We have updates. What about ETH and central bank digital currencies? Well, okay, let's look at Ethereum. This is from Stain, Mr. Wu. What was the largest transaction that failed? It was like $5,000 to fail a transaction, I think, in the last couple of years. I'm not sure what the average cost of the transaction is, but I think they just completed their merge and they have proof of stake now. So they're essentially going to be able, they have their oligarchy already, so they can control the chain now, centralized, right? All of their, people that own the ETH, they'll be able to control the consensus of it. It should have slightly better consensus throughput because they're, having epic slotted time blocks. They essentially have, they're all those delegated proof of stake or whatever. It's just like an epic based system where it's like, okay, you have this slot that you're allocated that you can do. It's not stochastic and, pure Nakamoto consensus. It's kind of more regimented. It's, I'd say somewhat of an illusion of decentralization. But anyway, let me just explain it like this. When I was 12, okay, I was working on a game. Interesting enough, my game was called World War III, The Last World War. And the whole game was, a real-time strategy game, kind of like Age of Empires, if you guys remember that. You had nukes and carpet bombs and stuff. It was really fun, right? And so I just kept adding stuff into this game. Like, oh, I got to make my tank tracks follow, and I got to add all these particle effects if the tanks are getting hit, and explosions when, the tank shoots rounds. And, it was really fun, right? I kept adding code and adding code and adding code. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to add this now. Oh, hey, I need to add this now. Hey, I'm going to add this now. One day, tried to turn it on. Didn't work. Just, died. I think I got to, 10,000 lines of code is all. And it just, right? That's when I learned structure is important, okay? And anticipating the needs, right? Anticipating how the software will evolve and proactively designing it rather than reactively designing it, okay? So when I was 12, that's when I learned, don't do that, okay? Ethereum, that's what they've done. They started up basic. They say, oh, we need this need. We're going to add this feature. We're going to add this feature. We're going to add this in. We're going to add this in. We're going to add this in. And what that does is it just keeps stacking and stacking and stacking. Now, one of the big issues that they face is this virtual machine, quote unquote, it requires the state to be managed on disk. So you have these disk lookup issues. You have disk throughput issues. I remember Jeff Garzik told me more recently not more recently, times all skewed. In 2018, when we were meeting, he came over to our office and, we're hanging out, and he's telling me that the Ethereum back then, if you didn't have a solid state drive, an SSD, you just couldn't run an Ethereum node because it would take 25 seconds to validate, right? But yet the block time was 15 seconds, right? Do the math. You get this slower processing than what it's capable of processing, and that's why you get these massive bottlenecks, right? Ethereum doesn't have a block size. They have a computational bottleneck and a disk latency bottleneck. And in computer software, you get what's called combinatorial explosion. Combinatorial, like combinations, right? When you have a combination and then multiply that by another combination and multiply by another combination and multiply by another combination and so on and so forth, it explodes in complexity, right? And when your complexity explodes, sure, you've got more computing power now than we had 20, 30 years ago. But with the blockchain especially, it becomes extra susceptible. So, these Ethereum fees are getting driven up because you get all these backlogs. And, all in all, Ethereum just, it doesn't work. And the central banks are known for using software that doesn't work. If the IRS in the United States here, it regularly crashes. Their whole system just crashes. Oh, nope, it's down again. It's that time of the month. What else does our reminder says? Ethereum, right? That time of the month. Oh, yep. Ethereum's getting clogged up again. So, the notion of utilizing Ethereum to run central bank digital currencies is actually, really good for us because, you're not going to be able to use it. Now, they can talk about Plasma and all these layer 2, and that's probably what they're going to try to do is do all this layer 2 stuff and use the main Ethereum blockchain as a settlement layer. But it doesn't have the throughput and capacity to handle that many transactions. And it's, they can try to take away cash, okay, but you can't take away value. Okay, let's say in a hypothetical scenario, they get a central bank digital currency and they try all the stuff. It doesn't change anything. We can still buy and sell gold with each other. We can still store value. I mean, there's certain things that act naturally as currencies, like, like for instance, in prisons, cigarettes are the currency, right? Everybody smokes, and it's just, that's the currency. Anything that really is a mutually agreed upon value can be a currency. So you just can't get rid of physical commodities and physical currencies. Yeah, get rid of the Federal Reserve notes. Great. That's one less thing for us to have to deal with. And put in the central bank digital currency. It doesn't matter because we have alternatives now. Back 100 years ago, it did matter because people didn't have alternatives. We didn't have alternative systems we could build. Now it doesn't matter how much they try to suppress or make it illegal or whatever else. You can't stop a mob. When enough people are using it, you just can't enforce it. That's the other thing is like, make as many laws as you want, but they can't enforce, right? I mean, look at all of the protests and riots that have been going on around the world. I mean, the Netherlands, dude, the farmers are like throwing piles of, what would it be, feces, in the government buildings, right? Piles of malarkey, piles of, it's just the people have had enough, and that's why there's certain sterilization agendas and stuff, but. And there is, in some degrees, there is some level of overpopulation on the planet, but it doesn't matter because they won't be able to enforce it. I remember China. How many times has China made Bitcoin illegal? I mean, so many times. I remember I've been involved since 2013. I can count at least like half a dozen times China made Bitcoin illegal. And, all it did was make Bitcoin dump a little bit. And then people in China still got Bitcoin. They still use Bitcoin, right? You can't make it go away. It's just impossible to make it go away. And it's impossible to tell people that they're not allowed to use it. You can't even block people from using Bitcoin nodes because it's kind of like a torrent network. You can use VPNs, or you can there's so many ways to bypass it. And it's a kind of a cat and a mouse game, right? They are big and slow. So they can make changes, but it's these big, slow changes. All we have to do is just change one little thing, and we can cause them an incredible amount of work to try to pursue it, right? Okay, you want to try to block, networks. Okay, well, we're going to turn the whole Nexus network into a VPN network and Tor. Okay, oh, you want to try to block and filter this? Okay, we're going to use quantum resistant encryption. Oh, you want to block our ability to communicate with each other? Okay, we're going to create a peer-to-peer messenger system. Have fun. That's why I would recommend everybody to read that book, The Starfish and the Spider. I'll post a link to it in the main channel after this. It really demonstrates the power of these organizations, right? Of decentralized headless organizations. They just pop up everywhere like herpes, you can't get rid of them, and that's something that's what's so cool about, what's happening right now. And we have a unique power that we've never had before, right? Like the last time there was, potential world wars, like people didn't have a choice. The last Great Depression, man, people didn't have a choice. Now we can make our own economies. We can bring people together. We can trade food with one another. I mean, that's what I'm seeing happening a lot is people are thinking locally. People are putting these things together. So with Ethereum, the central bank digital currencies, even if they use Quorum or anything else, I mean, it is very well known in all of the business world. And trust me, we went all up and down the business world through 2018. I wish I could tell you some names, but I don't want to get sued because we did sign non-disclosure agreements. But part of the Tritium protocol, a lot of it was designed by talking to some of the world's biggest companies, like biggest insurance providers, music industries, package tracking. I mean, we were talking to some, and we made a lot of waves because what we're working on is very unique and it's very capable. And compared to Ethereum, it's just night and day. I mean, that's how we got attention from a lot of these larger companies. Now, I'm glad. Some of those use cases didn't pan out. I mean, a lot of it was politics, believe it or not. I was a threat to their existing status quo. That happened a lot. I'd go in there and we'd get up to CEO. I'd write papers to teach all of these executives about it. And then, the head of blockchain for the companies would, who are these guys? Oh, who's this guy? Who do they think they are? Because like a lot of these companies were actually just like pretending to have blockchains and they didn't. But I still do have all of the list of those contacts. Just so you guys know, with Brian Venna, if you guys remember that, and Alex Elnamer with Nexus Enterprise, I have everything. So I've just been sitting on that for the right time. I've been waiting pretty much to finish Tritium++ before I really started reaching out to a lot of those leads again. So there's a lot of things that have happened that are still live. A lot of the connections that, I mean, the 2017 conference was huge. There's still a lot. Like I just tested it, like last year, just reached out to a pretty notable libertarian who's got a pretty large following just to check, like, hey man, like, let's pick up this conversation again. I just wanted to see how, 30 minutes. He responded back to me. We got on the phone the next day. Like we have a really good reputation with a lot of those things. We do have a reputation of being slow, but we have a reputation of being accurate and consistent and developing really good technology. And like I said, you can't put a time limit on these things because it's never been done before. Consider Nexus kind of like research and development project, right? Like we're not claiming to have all the answers to these things. What we're claiming is that we're developing something and testing it and verifying these architectures and improving these architectures to get it to that point. Just like our social architecture, right? Don't consider that this perfect architecture. We're beta testing it right now. And so things are going to happen. Like, where you're going to have a chair that, may try to do certain things and not do other things. And that's okay. This is what we want. You want to run into these issues now so that we don't have bigger issues, in 5 years, right? So one thing I just want to encourage you guys as a community is to be more involved. If you see something, say something, right? I'm sorry I said that. I think that's like a UK. See something, say something, sorted, blah. But what I'm saying is, if there's something that you don't vibe with, if there's, things that are happening that you don't agree with or that you need, speak up. But don't speak up in the community channel being like, man, like getting upset, but file an incident report. Or reach out to the chair directly if you have an issue with them. Or, reach out to Lexi. She's, the chair. The finances they do audits. Say, hey, I need a special audit to investigate this specific thing. Here's the invoice that I want to verify these funds went to this, and that way we have a formal professional process to manage all these things, because we're not going to be without issues. We're not going to be without conflict. These things are going to happen. The system's designed to tolerate these types of things. And so I just want to really inspire that with you guys to remember that it's really, really important that we need to take a step up, guys. We need to raise ourselves up. We need to lift ourselves up to a higher level, right? If you didn't notice, I shaved, right? I took DLT Novice's advice to some degree. So, we need to do our best as a community to do that. And really the system isn't going to work unless you guys participate, right? You guys need to speak up if there's a problem, especially if you're in an arm too. If you're inside an arm, speak up. If there's issues, if people are violating protocols, speak up, file an incident report. Ideally the arm should be able to self-manage and should handle itself, internally. But if that doesn't happen, that's what the whole jury process is for. And also, don't be afraid to bring an incident up. Don't try to conceal problems. Like, if a problem happens, bring it up to the jury, take care of it, right? That's really, really important for us to do, because I've noticed one pattern that we have is like, we'll all kind of just, oh, it's okay. Oh, maybe it'll get better. Oh, let's check back next month. Like, no, man, if there's a problem, bring it up and say it and let's get it solved, right? We need to nip these things in the bud before they become bigger problems, right? So it's really important. I just wanted to express that to you guys too, just after this last weekend, right? And then, I think my duty is I need to be better at communicating with you guys in a more formal way like this, with the video chats and discussing with you guys and helping you guys remember what we're all doing this for, because the power of a network is incredible. I mean, dude, the music industry, the biggest industries on the planet, wiped out by Napster, right? Just a little network, just a little computer program, completely eliminated all of these, realms of profit. I wouldn't say it eliminated the whole industry, but it took a huge hit, right? David and Goliath. We have that power together, right? We have that power together. And that's an advantage we'll have over other projects if we're able to work together in that way. Because this power will multiply exponentially. 2 have the power of 4, 4 have the power of 16, right? If we're all fighting against each other linearly, or waiting for someone, or hoping for something to happen, then we're wasting the possible resources. And then it's just like 1 has the power of 1, right? Or 2 has the power of 2, right? We lose that exponential potential, right? So that's something I really want to express to you guys too, that it's really, really important that we all get involved in at least some way, shape, or form, whether that's just reporting things or, running audits or, chatting with other people. And we're also doing some, new security protocols for the jury, for instance. The jury is going to have an identity verification requirement so that we can, get rid of the moles, right? Because there's a lot of people that, just come out of nowhere and they start acting really helpful and stuff, and you never know who they are. So, they could very well be the same person or not. So we're kind of locking down that, and chairs at the very least will need to authenticate their identity too. Because if you guys remember Mike Trick, we don't know his last name. It was Mike Trick. And, he committed fraud. He took funds and he used it to fund a store, and, he never paid it back. And you're not supposed to do that as a nonprofit. That's fraud. Everything has to be logged into the embassy. So, we need to keep our eye on these types of things, and we need to have better, verification. That's one thing that we've learned a lot over the last couple of chairs that kind of went bad. But like I said, these things are very important to happen because it's part of testing. Just like it's great that Mike and Arun managed to break, the 5.1. They found issues in the core that needed resolving, and now I fixed them, and now Nexus is that much stronger. Think of the social architecture that way too. Instead of thinking that everything has to be perfect and working all the time and people have to always be, then we have to just essentially work together, right? And do our parts in that. And it's not going to all be perfect, right? That's part of the testing process. So I just wanted to just monologue about that a little bit. I'm going to keep scrolling down the questions. How much of a fiasco is it going to be? How far will they be able to push it with the inflation here in Europe? I mean, it's hard to say on the CBDC, the central bank digital currencies. I think they're rushing it. Yes. Hello, that looks good.
I hear you.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you. We're back. We're back, baby.
Now we're back. Okay, dude, that's so funny.
That was a long monologue.
Well, I was wondering why Henry was like, dude, because I was just talking about the Treasury direct accounts for Federal Reserve. Right when I started talking about that, it all went offline. I don't know.
Let's rewind a bit.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to it. Let's see how much of the fiasco it can be.
Yeah.
So the central bank digital currencies, I'm not really too concerned about it because I think of rushing the agenda a bit. The fundamental thing is we have other options now, right? I mean, all this massive hyperinflation happening everywhere is causing more and more volatility for, our existing financial systems, which, that's just raising the bar, the barrier of entry to remain in these existing financial systems, where we can lower the bar of entry for Nexus, right? Continually develop the wallets, make it a lot easier to use, make it feel like an online bank account, and, growing the economy and setting up trade networks. And there's going to be a point where I believe we're going to be less volatile than these other existing currencies. So, switching to these central bank digital currencies, especially being used on Ethereum, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a joke to me. Yeah, I had some concern when I was seeing Janet Yellen. I was like, oh, okay. But then when they said, oh, we're going to build it on Ethereum, I'm just like, oh, okay, that's no problem, man. They're years and years away from that if they're ever going to try to get that. Ethereum's it's not capable of providing what they need, right? I mean, the fees are just too high. They have these disk throughput issues, right? So, I'm not as concerned about it. But this is something I was saying. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I have friends that have verified it. If you're in the U.S., you take your social security card. There's a number on it that's not your social security number. Use that as a routing number. And then your social security number you use as an account number. And it's called a Treasury direct account. It's got your name on it. And there's people that have actually bought a car on it. Like it actually it's a plugged in bank account. But then, they get black bagged, right? So I wouldn't recommend it. But it's interesting that there's this infrastructure built up around that already, right? There's a value on each one of our heads. But, we have the right to claim that. And, I'm just seeing that there's just too many people awake right now for that to work, right? If this were 5-10 years ago, there would be a lot more potential for bad things to happen with the central bank digital currencies. But, all they have is Ethereum, right? I mean,
guys, have you also heard about Amazon as claiming all the Ethereum transactions because 52% is running completely on Amazon on the database? You guys heard anything about it?
AWS, yeah. Amazon's they're running most of the Ethereum. Yeah,
They're
everyone's
claiming all the transactions because the biggest, yeah, I'm not entirely sure the whole story, but they're claiming like all the transactions done on Ethereum because the biggest part is running in the US, or not entirely sure.
Yep. And so, I mean, their tech stack is limited, right? I mean, Ethereum can barely even handle the number of transactions per second it does right now. They don't have a block size. They're really in a computational bottleneck. And as I was saying earlier, it reminds me of one of my first, games that I wrote, that got to 5,000-10,000 lines. It imploded after a period of time because I didn't really do this proactive designing. I was just adding in features. But you really have to design kind of like a skeletal system for the program so that it can support all of these different features. Otherwise, it just becomes this amalgamation. It's interesting. And there's, a lot of people in computers that they've gotten lazy with, all of these really fast computers nowadays. And they're so abstracted away from the hardware that, there's this really fine art that I've found with blockchain to get it to really, really function as we want. Other people are compensating for that with centralization, but we're already seeing issues with like bridges, for instance, Solana bridges getting hacked and everything. And it's just going to keep happening and happening. And these, regular currencies like the euro and the dollar and the pound, I mean, they're boom, they're going bad. It's just, they're all falling and they're becoming more and more volatile. So people are going to trust them less and less. And then the other point too is that you just can't get rid of stores of value. In prisons, they use cigarettes, right? That's their store of value. They trade cigarettes. That's their money. That's their currency. In other places, silver, gold, like anything of value you can use as a store of value. So, you can't get rid of physical commodities, physical stores of value. And I think that's something that people are going to really gravitate towards too, maintaining, right? So, we're working on what we're going to, I've been working on this type of like decentralized ATM network and some other ideas and like peer-to-peer markets too, for instance, Netherlands, if you've seen the farmers protest, they're trying to attack our food supply through grocery stores and grocery chains. We'll be able to totally eliminate that if we have our own peer-to-peer markets, right? Where you can essentially tokenize your crops that you grow and then sell them in a type of peer-to-peer marketplace. So we're working on things like that too, because I think that's something that is going to become more and more of a need over time as we see more like, if you've seen World Economic Forum, they're like literally pushing eating bugs. But more recent studies have found that like 60% of all these bugs are contaminated with parasites and stuff. So like, it's just like, it's killing people, right? I just don't see it being, a thing. They're going to try, but I don't see it succeeding. I really don't. They've got a long way to go if they're going to use Ethereum too. It just is not capable of processing the transaction capacity required to have a global payment system, right? They may try to use Ripple, Ripple Labs is the new partner of World Economic Forum, but they're becoming irrelevant. Look at China. You can't get your money out of the banks. There was a guy, I think it was Iran. He literally did a whole hostage situation at a bank, right? Not to rob the bank, to get some of his deposit out because he had like 500,000 in there and he needed to pay for a surgery for his father and he couldn't get it out. He couldn't get it out of the bank, right? So they're in this massive debt implosion. I'm pretty sure that in order for these agendas to really have worked properly, they needed it to happen a while ago. But the Ethereum, poster boys, Vitalik, they haven't been able to deliver. They're still, sure, they have proof of stake. It took them 7 years to do proof of stake, and that's it. That's all they've done. They've added some more features on Ethereum, but the virtual machine is still slower than dog shit. It's just, I just see that there's too many people awake, and I don't think people want to fight either. To try to create this world war, you need people to fight. I just don't think there's enough willing people. If you've seen the Russian draft going out, there's tons of people escaping to Finland, right? I just don't think that they have the necessary mindset of people in order to really effectively pull off this global communist government like they're trying to do right now. Look at monkeypox, right? you know, we knew that they were going to try to like, ooh, smallpox, blah, you know, monkeypox, and nobody cares, right? They've cried wolf too many times. Like, people are waking up, they're getting wise to all of these issues. And so I think central bank digital currencies are very similar. You know, their justification for central banks is just dwindling more and more and more every day, you know? So like, it's just only going to really kind of go in our favor if we do things correctly, right? If we focus on developing utility in places of the world really needs it. And this is our time. That's why, like, the 5.2, I'm going to be working on a preliminary file system so that we can have, you know, decentralized hosting started, right? And I want to make it where it's really easy to deploy a new web service too. You know, the servers, right? Like, I mean, going in and having to get a lamp stack and then getting in your seat panel and having to change this and then update this and update this configuration and load this server and blah, blah. It's way too complicated for the everyday person. So we want to make that simple as possible. And that's where I see really technological advancement becoming very, very, very important, is when you can take something complex and make it easy to operate. That's the ticket right there, right? So that's, you know, that's how I see it anyway. Like, I'm not too concerned. I have faith that everything is going to happen for the right reasons, right? And sometimes you have to go through, you know, the darkness to get through, you know, to the light, right? And that's kind of where we're at right now. You know, we're having to go through these trials and tribulations as a society, you know. But I mean, just looking at, you know, the way of the world, like, there's too many people waking up. I mean, last year it was like 1 in 2 people. I mean, it's even more now, at least in the United States. I mean, it's rare to see someone that's, you know, asleep nowadays, to be honest, than, you know, someone that's, you know, awake. It's just more and more people are starting to rise up in droves. I mean, you see, you know, protests everywhere, right? And the protests are happening because that's all people know how to do. Now, wait till we get like actual, you know, viable technologies where we can do, you know, silent protests, where we don't have to fight, where we can just say, okay, well, we're going to create this new decentralized service. We're going to start managing our information over here. We're going to create our own little supply chain tracking systems. We'll create our own organic certification. We'll create our own, you know, private membership associations so that we can be in our own specific jurisdictions, right? And we'll be able to bypass all of these things and not really have those issues come to hand. You know what I mean? In order for a central bank digital currency to really, truly excel, it's going to have people using it, and you'll get people that are using it to some degree. But, you know, when there's better options out there, it's you can't fight with that, right? The only way that you can pull off, you know, an oppressive system is if there's no other options for recourse. I mean, we've provided options. There's lots of other people providing options too. There's lots of people fighting the fight, right? So I just don't see it really succeeding in the long term. We may have some short term, you know, speed bumps that we have to deal with, but, you know, long term, this is the end game. They're on their way out. You know, the powers that were, as far as I see it, right? And they're getting more and more desperate too. Their narratives are changing very quickly. They're starting in fight. You know, it's just there's too many things happening and too many people awake, I think, for it to truly succeed. But that's just my perspective on it. Is contact being made for the next Anarchapulco? Did you wish to attend any other events on your radar? I was recently contacted by the invite team for Anarchapulco. I will be speaking in Anarchapulco this next year. They've doubled the event size to 1,000 people. We're doing some other really cool stuff with some live art. You'll see it when we get there. There's some really cool. Some of you might know about it. 2-dimensional never matrices. They're really, really fascinating. And I actually wrote a computer program to find them, which was really cool. It's kind of like breaking. I wrote an exponential algorithm because they exponentially get more and more and more complex as they get larger orders. 7x7 versus 8x8. It's exponentially more permutations required. But I've actually been able to find them in constant time, which means my algorithm scales exponentially, which like would be the equivalent of like a quantum computer for these squares. So there's going to be some art aspects to it, some music, and obviously the crypto stuff. So we'll have a presence there. I believe we're going to get a booth. We're going to be sponsoring it this year. And some of the art pieces, I think are going to be auctioned off. So I'm going to be seeing what I can, discuss, see if there's any potential for doing some NFT auctions using the Nexus wallet. So we're going to try to get this one to be more interactive I want to do something with, mesh networks or, some basic hardware to start to demonstrate some of that, because I know they've had internet connection issues. So yes, we've been invited and we're going to be present there this next year. Still working on all of the details. I will inform you guys once we have all of those. Any other events on our radar? Not necessarily. If there's events that you guys think that we should, that would be cool. Float Fest was okay. It was a decent event. But I feel like there's probably better uses of my time in the near term to just be coding. Anarchapulco is a great event to do, so I'm willing to do that, because it does create a lot of. There was a lot of fruit that came from this last Anarchapulco, but I'm pretty much planning on staying in as much as possible. I'm doing interviews here and there where I'm invited. I'm in contact with some publication companies too to see about getting more promotion happening, and like as I was saying, some market makers too, to develop some relationships that can help in growing the market and growing our presence and onboarding new users and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm standing with the events. But if you feel like there's events that we should do or anything else, I'm open to it. But I've been feeling kind of just keeping it shoestring budget for right now, and just they're gonna pay for my travel expenses to go to Anarchapulco, and I just want to really focus on the code, because I think that's really the most important thing to do right now, is just get all of these things done, right? Get these features done. By the next Anarchapulco, I think we could be storing certain websites. We can do demonstrations of the decentralized search over, our file system and things like that. Things that replace the IPFS is what it's called. So that's one thing that I've actually kind of moved up to the 5.2 update to really improve that. I think that's going to be something really, really important, is to have retention of information in a way that it can't be manipulated. And yes, it'll be an amazing moment to show some of the updates and potential use cases. And also, I'm hoping to create a use case out of it with NFT auctions or something like that, because you'll be able to actually auction the NFT on chain with the peer-to-peer marketplace. So I think that'll be something that'll be really powerful. That'll be really important. At what point would you like to see us spread our wings? Spain, what do you mean by that? As far as like, at what point do I want to see Nexus soar or grow? Personally, if I'm answering this correctly, anytime. The world is our oyster, guys. Like as I was saying earlier, people multiply value exponentially. So 2 have the power of 4, 4 have the power of 16, so on and so forth. So if we work together, we're a really powerful force, right? If we actually, all of us work together, all of us do something. That doesn't mean you have to be in a starfish arm, but that means, if you see something, report an incident report. If you see someone on the team that does something, if you wanted more updates and you felt like there was issues, let's say with relationships like we've been experiencing, say something right when it happens and bring it up so that it doesn't grow into a bigger issue, because we're still testing this architecture, so it's not going to work exactly perfect. We're going to run into issues. We're going to see how people try to exploit it. People are going to try to take advantage of it. And these are things that we want to write safeguards for in the Constitution. So, all of this feedback right now is really, really important for all of us to have a very healthy, vibrant, growing economy. So, I'd like to see us spread our wings now. All of us spread our wings. All of us get together and, think of things, think of what we can do, how we can contribute, how we can grow it. What are things that our local area needs? Think local. Hey, what does my local city need? What does my town need? Can I help create these marketplaces? Oh, maybe I could create an online store. Like, what are things that you feel the world needs, and how can we achieve those, right? Those are really, really important qualities that we need to all embody. Heard Jeff talking that he's busy with the speaker list and invites at the moment. Yeah, they are working on the invite list right now. Like I said, Chris, I responded to the speaker list. Should all be going through. We're working on a potential sponsorship too, and maybe a couple workshops this year. So yes, that is happening. Within the last week, I received an invite. Do you expect major hurdles in the near future, and how do you think you will be able to work around these? Generally, I hope not to expect major hurdles. But honestly, a lot of the major hurdles I feel have been surmounted. As far as like getting, when you write a new protocol out from scratch and then deploy it in a public live network, it can be very complex. And there's a lot of things that you may not see. So since we're pretty far into the Tritium protocol already, the Tritium++ has just been kind of augmenting a lot of that. So algorithmically, the biggest hurdle was like the constant time database. That was just a mathematical symphony. That was just, oh my God, that took a lot of work to get that right. But I mean, even the precision T class was just a couple days. It was pretty quick. I'm fairly efficient now. Let's see, I think average 500 to 1,000 lines in a day, depending on the day. Sometimes 100 if it's like I'm debugging something, but I've been fairly efficient. So I don't anticipate to have too many hurdles, Christoph, but when I run into a hurdle, I have certain processes, like if I get to a roadblock, I don't sit there and be obsessed with trying to fix it. I'll take a break, go sit out under this tree, meditate for 10, 15 minutes. And usually the solution comes to me, and I'll be just like, oh, okay. And, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So if you sit there and try to solve it, you're going to stress yourself out, and you're probably going to be thinking in loops. You just got to kind of set yourself aside from the problem, and then, sit in a little bit different mindset, and then the solutions usually come. So that's usually how I handle hurdles. I might just take a minute, go get some fresh air, and maybe play some harp or something, and then it usually reveals itself to me. Could you throw some ideas on Fiat ramp? Yes. Themad, I can throw some ideas on Fiat ramp. I can actually write a document for my decentralized Fiat system. It's kind of like a safety deposit box is the idea, a decentralized safety deposit box where you have like a stable token that represents some sort of fiat value in some box, and that becomes like your claim slip, so that you can get this fiat token from someone else and then just take that fiat token to one of these ATMs and withdraw by transferring those fiat tokens in, right? And then those fiat tokens then will be sold or given to the next person that deposits cash into these boxes. And then you can have different trade values for each of them so that there can be arbitrage and basically creating decentralized fiat on and off ramps. That would be my ideal situation. I've contacted other exchanges. I think like Abacus, we were speaking for a while. They were willing to set up a fiat system because they're doing that for BEF, but it was a pretty large sum. So right now I'm just working on the initial kind of architectural, but I'll go into the fiat on ramp and be a little bit more active in their theme ed. What about the corporate ISO 20022 nonsense? Is this like a Howey test to check if a protocol is not a security? I'm not sure. I haven't studied too much. I saw that in a group a little bit. It's a proposed legislation, and they're really just trying to make a bunch of malarkey, but really ultimately it has to be enforced, right? It has to be enforceable. And if you read the Starfish and the Spider, you'll find that you can't enforce on a decentralized system because it's decentralized, because you have to have some sort of control, right, over the issuance. We've already got, a long letter on how we're not a security, and there's already case law showing the SEC says that you're not a security if you're sufficiently decentralized. One of the fundamental parts of the Howey test, or the telling us something is security, is waiting for or expecting return and profits based off of the work of someone else. So the best thing we can do to combat any of these regulatory things is be as community driven as possible. Work together as much as possible, contribute your ideas, help each other, get involved, and continue to decentralize these embassies, starfishes, and everything else like that. Then there's nothing to take out, right? There's no single point of failure to take out. So even if they do put regulations out, what are they going to do? What are they going to come arrest me for? What, like typing code? The guy doing Tornado Cash, they could be a little bit more aggressive on him because they're supporting illegal activity. But that's why I never did anonymous cryptography. If you guys, I've been asked that a lot. Hey, do Anon. And I'm like, not yet. That's why, but the way that it's designed, there's no really centralized infrastructure that's managed or run. The Tornado Cash, I believe, had some degree of that, right? And the anonymous cryptocurrencies obviously are used for illicit funds. So we're keeping everything very above board, and we want everything to be transparent and as legal as possible. We don't want to be trying to use Nexus to commit crimes or anything else like that. We need to be super squeaky clean, because we don't want to give them badge to beat us with, right? So we got to just be really, really careful about how we approach things. And if you're concerned about any sort of regulation, get involved. Do something. Do something for Nexus. Think of something that you want to do, add to it, everything else like that. That's really important. Otherwise, it will kind of degrade into a more centralized thing, right? This last weekend, it's kind of evidence that I think we tend to, as a community, let things slide a little bit more, and then let it kind of get to a point where then it becomes this issue. Let's bring it up when it happens. If there's something that you see that you don't like, talk about it. You can reach out to Lexi, or you can reach out to Francisco, or Radiant, Aaron, who's the chair of the jury, and you can request investigations or anything else like that. And that's going to be a really professional process that we need to make sure that we keep to, right? It's really important. We need to have a very professional, clear process for resolving these conflicts and handling them, because if we have like big explosions in the community, I mean, it's okay if you guys need to vent out, but just realize that kind of shoots us in the foot, right? Because put yourself in the shoes of the new person coming in. If you see that, you'd be like, oh, this is a shit show. We're not a shit show, but it can become traumatic sometimes. And I think that's because, things go long enough and people don't say anything, or they don't feel comfortable, or they're not listening themselves. So if you feel something, if you have an intuition, at least talk to someone about it. Talk to a chair, or talk to, a judge like, Phil, or, request an audit, and that will help a lot. Lexi right now is budgeted for 3 to 4 audits per month. So we're going to be having consistent audits of all the arms from here forward. All right. So that's going to help at least maintain some accountability. But there's also, special audit requests if you ever need them. So Sohan, should dApp builders adopt nonprofit-like infrastructure to tackle governments that accuse crypto companies of the reason that we do a nonprofit structure is essentially really just to lock the assets inside. We don't want people that work for Nexus to go take the funds and use it to start their own companies. That's happened a couple times, as you've seen, right? But still, regardless of that, we have that asset locked because we want to make sure that people don't take money to just benefit themselves directly. If you're looking for a dApp building type of structure, look up private membership association. I'm not sure what the equivalent of that would be in your country. I'm pretty sure they have them though. It's in its own jurisdiction. So you're actually outside of state, local, county jurisdiction. So for instance, in the United States, in Jonesboro, Arkansas, it's still a dry county, Craighead County, which means that you can't buy or sell alcohol. You have to go to a bootlegger. It's completely illegal. But there's bars because they're private clubs. Private membership associations are outside of all jurisdiction. So you can utilize those, right? Obviously, you can't use them for human trafficking and stuff. Like there's some level of common law that binds them, but use a private membership association structure because that will allow you to just stay completely out. It doesn't mean that the executive branch is not going to overreach and attack you, but what it does mean is that you'll be able to at least bypass some of those regulations. And for instance, if you're worrying about securities laws, if you have, token fundraisings inside your app and stuff like that, private membership association will help you with that, but also doing it as private offerings. Securities laws only come into effect on public offerings. So you can do a private sale or keep it as a private membership association or something like that. And that'll help shield you from all of their legal attempts to attack us. Because at least in the United States, there's 70 Supreme Court cases that are supporting the jurisdiction of a private membership association. And there's been a lot of cases that have come up that have, been directly in response, to trying to take out the PMA jurisdiction, and they haven't worked because that's what the elite, they use private membership associations. The creature from Jekyll Island Country Club, private clubs, country clubs, right? Police aren't actually even allowed on private membership associations. So look into that. That's the way that we're going. That's what we're doing for serious technology and research. And that's how you don't get labeled as security for, satellite tokenization and all these other things too. So that's a really, really important distinction. And I would definitely utilize that as your company shell. It's not really a company. It's somewhat of a different structure. It's kind of interesting. So look into that. Private membership associations. Okay. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Maybe restart. We're missing the party. No sound. He didn't notice. Yes, I didn't. I thought when I was talking about the Treasury Direct account, and Henry was just like, "Rrr," and I was like, oh wait, like, should I not talk about? Fuck it, I'm gonna keep talking about it. But that's right when the sound cut. Interesting enough, right? My phone does that too. My phone just the sound will just it stops working, so I can't even use it reliably anymore. Because whatever reason, it's Apple, right? Anyway, everything went offline after his question online. Our proof of stake is not going through AWS, or is it? I'm not sure, man. Let me see. Our AWS, I'm sure some people use AWS droplets, but a lot of our stuff is not on, AWS driven services, and we want to make sure to keep it that way. We want to keep people off of AWS as much as possible, just for the principle of it too. Amazon is, a horrendous company, so I've boycotted Amazon for a long time. I would recommend everybody else do not spend money on Amazon if you can help it. It's feeding the beast. Jeff Bezos is one of them, right? So is Elon. The guys didn't put that together. Look at the whole Twitter thing. Nah, he's gonna buy Twitter. Oh, it's bots. It's called controlled opposition. He's completely in bed with World Economic Forum. You don't become that large of a billionaire if you're not, right? Very rarely. It can happen though. But all right. For reference, this was the diagram for the ETH proof of stake. Do you feel safe working on Nexus? Safe as in, like, am I afraid that I'm going to get black bagged? No. I mean, I was drugged and framed a couple times in 2016, 2017. They tried to frame me and drug me. God's looking after me, man. Thankfully I was safe. They tried though. They tried. I'm not sure exactly what's going on anymore. I mean, I haven't been. My internet gets messed with here and there, and plugs. Like, I mean, right after I released the Nexus protocol white paper, like, my internet got unplugged at the telephone pole and stuff. I mean, I'm not sure, man. I mean, I'm not really too concerned about it because why am I going to waste my head space thinking about that? If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If it's not, it's not, right? Why am I going to sit and be like, hey, am I going to get caught? Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm building software. The software that I'm building has a lot of positive utility for people in the world. Anyone can use it. It's open source, not taking ownership of it. I'm paying my taxes. I'm keeping everything legal. I'm dad, got 5 kids, raising all my kids, doing my best to be a good person. So, if they try to take me out, they can try to take me out. I'm not really too concerned about it. I am bringing in, hopefully by the end of the year, there should be somebody I can download my brain into, though. I'm going to be meeting them. Seems to be on the same wavelength as me. Been coding their whole lives. Very interested in libertarian, crypto stuff. So hopefully that will pan out correctly. I'm working on redundancy, right? That's a really important thing. Getting someone that I can work with directly on Nexus and ping ideas back and forth. So that should be. It's not the person that I was looking at hiring prior to that. He's still, somewhat involved. We talk here and there. We chat here and there. His name was Krishna. He's a really solid guy. But that's some good news too, that, I have somebody that's potentially coming in. He'll be helping, probably on a voluntary basis, that I'll be able to download right into. That's the only thing that's, a potential, bottleneck. But as you see, Kendall's been learning how the code all works. I designed it and documented it super diligently. So, even if anything happened right now, Kendall could take over some of the feature development. I wouldn't say, all of it. He's been able to start hacking away at different things. But I mean, just have faith, guys. I honestly think we're small enough that we're flying under the radar, so we can just build all our stuff. So let's count our blessings in that way. If we were the size of Ethereum, there may be, a little bit more potential, but we want to make sure that by the time we get to that size, that we have all of our ducks in a row, that we're very pristine, We're squeaky clean. We have all of our legal stuff figured. We're not taking any unnecessary risks because we will get to a point where we'll become a larger threat. I think, we're kind of presumed to be, not as much of a threat anymore. So we can just continue to develop these things. So I'm not concerned about it. Don't waste my headspace on it. But, I am cautious with how I approach things, and I don't just run around and do stupid stuff. And be like, hey, hey, everybody, come arrest me, I keep everything legal, keep above board. Like I said, I have 5 kids, just feeding my kids and taking care of my family and doing my best. So I wouldn't worry about it either, guys. But I am, I'm developing contingencies. I'm not naive. I know that those things can potentially happen, and I'm not just, being like, oh, God's going to save me, I have faith that everything's going to be done in the right way. And that, God will help provide as God has. This isn't just like, it's blind faith. This is faith based on experience, my relationship with God. But, I have faith that everything will happen for the right way. But, I know that I also need to just make sure that I'm cautious in the way I approach things. So I would recommend the same to you guys is don't take any legal risks right now if you don't have to. Just be careful how you approach things and, make sure you're ethical in what you do, and you'll be okay. Safe, thanks. Where do you see Nexus in 2030 and is Phantom involved? 2030. That's what, 2022. That's hard to say, man. I don't know if I'm the best predictor of the future, but I feel like at some point there's going to be a massive inflection. And I really do feel like there's a lot of the work that we're doing, the world really needs it. It's not just in the technology too, but in the philosophies and the bringing people together and giving us almost, to know that there's things that can change, right? So by 2030, I mean, I'm definitely going to have some of this stuff. I'm going to have some satellites up. I'm going to be deploying some of my own. We'll have hydrogen battery systems. We'll have propulsion systems. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but like we could have some pretty cool techs depending on how it all, pans out in the garage and my lab. Adoption wise, I'm not sure. It's hard to say. I think Ethereum's probably getting to a point where, I said my first computer program, my first really big one, it just went, Ethereum might not be too far away from that too. They keep pruning it and stuff, and they have their whole, merge chain and stuff, but it's a lot of data. It's a lot of data, and the database ain't going to get any faster. So, I think there's going to be a point where we're recognized a lot more for what we do and what we have done, right? And especially in just the time we're in, like these are the times that test us, that test our faith, that test who we are. I've said that I'd never give up, and here I am, not giving up, and I won't, because I can't think any other way that the world needs this. History's written by the victors. We don't, but yet history is our strength for the future. So it's really important for us to make sure that we have, an accurate accounting of that. And, I think people really do need, something to know that is happening and to know that it is possible, that we have all these other options, that we don't have to constantly live like this, right? And I really, I hope by 2030, more and more people are able to see this, and that we can see this thriving economy and this joy, the joy for life, people finding a joy in life, realizing and seeing how beautiful it is, and how beautiful it is, especially when we work together, the family and the bond, right? I really truly do believe it at some point, like it's going to be used everywhere. It's only a matter of time. Look at Tesla and Edison, right? Edison electrocuted elephants, like Edison's like Ethereum and we're like Tesla. People say tech doesn't matter, but it does. The best tech wins, because, how should I say it? Not all the time, but the best tech wins that provides the minimum required functionality. So what I mean by that is DC didn't work. It didn't provide the minimum functionality. It couldn't provide electricity to people from city to city. AC could, right? No matter how much Edison tried to attack it, it never succeeded. Look at the time of Confucius. Confucius was, at a time after the Warring Period, or I think it might have been during the Warring Period, where there was all the different factions of China fighting each other, and there was hundreds of different doctrines being taught, and lots of different people trying to get their doctrine to be, the one that was accepted by the world. And Confucianism won because it was truth. It was true, right? And that's what we're doing. That's what we're building. It just, these types of things take a bit longer, and we're playing the long game too. We're developing a technology for, a future circumstance, and the circumstance is getting closer and closer to that. A lot of crypto now is just speculating and creating things for the current circumstances. Like, oh, hey, I'm going to make money. I want to speculate on this, I'm going to that, and I'm going to invest, and I'm going to, we're building currency, we're building an economy, and we're inspiring a network effect, and that's not something that just happens. That's something that happened with Bitcoin, and that's why Ethereum is never going to surpass Bitcoin. So, all it takes is two to start, right? To start this, to start a network. And, I'm seeing that happening more and more in the community, more and more people getting involved, more and more people, just starting to see things that they can do, and, adding to the whole community. So I think, that's going to be really important. But, but 2030, I got good feelings about it, guys. Like, I really do. I don't take my word on and create hope. I mean, please, Nullius and Verba, on your own word, right? Like, look at on the word of no one, like, make your decisions based off of the evidence that you've seen, and, what you can do. This is just personally my perspective, but I have faith. I have faith that it'll all come to the right moment. Even something like Binance, yeah, there was more volume, but I'm seeing actually, more real orders right now. It's hard to say. I know that there was a lot of people that noticed when our price would go up, like when we first broke out of the 50, 60 cent mark on Binance. There was so much price suppression. It would take millions and millions of dollars just to move the price up 20, 30%. And if you guys remember now, $20,000 will double our price, right? There's less actual selling pressure on there, because I'm pretty sure that Binance, buys 10, 20, 30% of the coins and then just, trades it and all sorts of other stuff. Like, it's just, and they're under investigation too. So, it makes sense, why this all happened. And I really, I can't deny, like, that this is where we are, and this is what, this is what has been brought to us, right? So we got to make the best with it. And, I like Bittrex. It feels kind of like we're decoupled now from a lot of those trends, quote unquote, where, Bitcoin goes up, price crashes, and whatever else. Like, I don't feel like we have those bots driving our markets so much anymore, which to me, I think is a good thing. It can take a little bit. Markets are sensitive. They take a bit of time to, shift. Even when we changed our ticker once, it took a lot for the market to kind of ready to figure out what's going on. But over time, I really think this is going to be in our long-term benefit. Right? Okay. See great developments at Phantom. Yeah, Phantom, Chris is they're doing some of their own things. I haven't been in contact with them as much. I've written them some documents and stuff like that. I know they're working on it. Me personally, I'm not focused on rockets. I think they're archaic technology in my sense. I'm working on new types of propulsion systems that are going to allow us to have more decentralized launch capacity. Rockets are cool, but like I said in the beginning of it, you have, this basically this weight required. Most of your thrust is going to actually carry your fuel, right? And then the rockets themselves are considered weapons. So you're regulated as an international arms dealer when you build and sell rockets. And if we're looking at building this decentralized communication, infrastructure, it's so easy to just be like, oh, okay, no more launches. Sorry. Fuck your constellation. Ain't going to happen. Like that. It's that easy. So, we need our own launch capacity, which is, so I've, still open. Like we still chat here and there, and like, they could use our operating system or not. I'm not sure exactly what their plans are right now. I'm personally not really impressed with rockets. I've built them. They're very primitive machines. Since I was 16, it's like, ooh, okay. Did it go far enough? No. Okay. More rockets, more engines. Did it blow up? Yeah. Okay. More struts. Like that's rocket engineering. I'm more of kind of like, developing new types of propulsion systems that are more futuristic systems. I'm not not so excited about rockets. So, but I'm glad you are, and they are doing cool things, definitely. And I'm sure there's, some connections over time that, will manifest or not. Me personally, I'm focusing centralized, rocket company because, like I said, that's very easily shut down and stopped. So that's why I kind of pivoted away from that idea as I got further down on the ISM frequencies and those ideas. It just kind of dawned on me that we're going to need to reassess all of these things because you don't want to have, all this money go into developing these satellites and launching them just to be, shut down at the rocket, right? We need to be able to get these things to go up everywhere, right? Can't wait to use Society. Yeah, Society looks really cool. Like Sohan, that's really cool. You've been really inspiring a lot of people in the community, Sohan. Like it's been really great to have you here. We really appreciate you. I'm sick of all the current social media models. The world has changed so much since social media. The algos control the minds. Did it blew up? More rockets? Sounds like a cool job. Yeah. So what's my take? My plasma channel? Let me see. Hope this is. I'm not. What is this? Oh, is this ionization? Designing a new next gen. Yeah, I mean, ion thrusters. Ion thrusters are cool, Sohan. But the problem with ion thrusters is they don't work in space, right? You kind of, but you don't really have so many ions or air particles in space. I'm working on, basically using electrical momentum in some ways, but I'm basically researching this really interesting coupling between electricity and some other type of force. I'm not sure exactly what it is yet, but it does, have the capacity. It's called the B field Brown effect, if you want to, and that does have some sort of electrohydrodynamics, is what they call it, which ion thrusting. Which is just, high voltage causes ionization and moves, particles, but it's also got some other really interesting properties as far as like modulating weights and things like that. I'm not going to speak too much in that because I'm still verifying the results, right? But if you want to look it up, it's called the B field Brown effect. That's what I'm studying. Essentially, there's this, interesting effect where high voltage systems cause lift. High voltage asymmetric capacitors will create lift. So based on other people's results, I think 380 watts will lift a kilogram. And, each satellite will be about a kilogram. So 400 watts and you can lift a kilogram. Ideally, I would like that to be kind of as a little drone. Where you can have a little drone that can go deliver these things or, having the propulsion on sat, and then eventually developing that into a vehicular propulsion system because I think it's called the overview effect. This is something, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jane Pointer. She helped design the Biosphere 2, which is down in Tucson. Friend of the family, I actually have her old car. I have an old Mustang. I bought it from Jane. So I'm going to reach out to them again soon because they're working on basically low impact carbon neutral propulsion. Too, they're doing it a little bit more old school with balloons, but she's basically cited this effect. It's called the overview effect, where if somebody goes into space, just from sitting in space, when they come back, it inspires them to do something more than just themselves, right? It takes you out of this like limited mindset of your little life, and you see this whole planet. You see all these things that are happening, and it changes your perspective, right? That, I think, is one of the most fundamental things that we can do for humanity right now is open up the skies to them, right? We need to be able to travel into space ourselves, right? Without a rocket, without all this complex equipment. Rockets are dangerous. They have tons of G-forces. They're bombs. They're missiles. They're arms. There's so many issues with that specific one. But if we can get, electrical propulsion systems working, effectively, I'm pretty sure that's the propulsion that's utilized, for transgalactic travel or solar system travel. It's not chemical fuel. I mean, Voyager 2 has barely made it out, I think, to the end of Saturn, in like 40, 50 years. It's not it's not the way. I just don't think it's the way. I think it's a way, and it started, but electrical propulsion is really interesting. So just check that out. I'm not so much into the ionization, but I'm looking at this electrogravitic coupling is what it's called. And T. Townsend Brown originally did some of the research on it, where he found when he electrified an object, it would cause the object's weight to change. So the idea of this is that you can actually change your inertial mass by changing essentially the way the gravitic field affects it. I'm not sure exactly how a gravitic field works, but like we don't know for sure. But the best understanding that I've been having is that you have every object in itself has a resonant frequency, right? And that's what actually these strings, that's the resonant frequency. That's why it makes those sounds. So this resonance essentially carries within it, from what I understand, the location. So, Earth itself, it has its own resonant frequency, but this resonant frequency is broadcasting its location. And then that causes our location to become modified. So when we can understand these, and I'm pretty sure an electric field seems to somewhat amplify your current location, frequency or not, which decouples you somewhat from the gravitic field and allows you to create your own gravitic fields. And then that way you create your own self-contained inertial system, right? Which it may seem a little bit far-fetched, but I'm doing it in a scientific process, and I'm verifying these results, and I'm testing it out myself. And there's been tests in vacuum chambers because there is some sort of ionization force related to it. But I think that's the key to developing propulsion, because if you're not aware, if you're flying a plane, let's say, for instance, to double your speed, it takes 10 tons of horsepower. Okay, so it's an exponential requirement. So you can't really reach these really high speeds because you have these limitations with relativity and Newtonian dynamics. From what I understand, this B-field-Brown effect, it scales actually with your voltage exponentially. So we could potentially create, these high performance, high speed propulsion systems, beyond just the satellite constellations. So it's worth investigating to me. And like I said, I'm following a strict scientific process. I got my hypothesis. I'm not assuming that anything is true, and verifying it all, specifically myself. So keep your eye out. Once I get the lab going again, you'll see the different, videos. I'll post videos. Obviously, I'm going to build a little lifter system that should, about 40,000 volts. It should create enough thrust to lift something. And then, obviously, I'm going to take all of these components and I'm going to put them into open source documents on Nexus and the file system, so that it's immutable forever. So we'll be able to utilize it for the future. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's just about everything that I needed to cover immediately. Does anybody else have any other questions? You want to speak up? Do you want to say anything? You can just, speak up with the speaker. Yeah, I agree, Stan. We should do these AMAs more frequently. I don't know if we need to do weekly. If you guys want to do like monthly or bi-weekly, like what you guys' thoughts on that? No thoughts? Monthly, Crypto Turk? That's what I was thinking. I was thinking bi-weekly or monthly. If we have, how about we'll do them upon request? Well, I'll plan on doing them monthly, but if you guys feel like you want more like frequent, we can do, another one. I think probably right now, since we're on the finish line with the 5.1 release, I'll do these bi-weekly. And then that can be a time that we can all discuss things. And I mean, we can even get it into, research projects too, right? Like, once I am able to replicate some of these more, schematics, I'll be able to be like, okay, here's the schematics. Like, I'm going to post you the self-resonating circuit and the conditioning process, so you guys can start trying to develop your own hydrogen fuel cells. And then obviously, once I'm able to replicate some of this B-field-Brown effect and all of those things and open source that, we can start different discussions and stuff like this. I want it to be a place where we can really have these open discussions with one another and share knowledge and, do it at a means to reach higher levels of consciousness, right? And developing the technology in order to make that possible. So is there anyone else that has any Any other comments? Anything you want to say? Any questions? Or are we about ready to wrap up? I think we've gone
I just have a
almost
quick one.
2 hours.
My name's Jonathan. The only person I probably met in real life is Arwen, and I'm trying to make the wiki site. I put his logo as the site logo, and I just want to make sure that I'm not breaking any rules in offering a community site.
No, I mean, dude, there's no rules about it. I mean, if it's official, like, just kind of think also just like, I mean, are you familiar with the history? Have you seen kind of what's happened like over the years with like all the people that have come and tried to defame Nexus and attack and whatever? Are you familiar with some of those stories, Jonathan?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you remember, but I actually pushed a code commit to LLL Tau in 2020.
Okay.
I read the docs, and I've been watching closely for at least 2 years. So I've actually seen a lot. Unfortunately, there's not been a single edit from anyone else to the wiki. It's fully centralized, even though there's 4 admins, because I'm the only contributor. That's the only problem. Not even a single malicious edit, even when I'm trying any response. I've not even had a single attack, even though I have 10 backups and I can restore. And there's just like I had a Minecraft server. I know how to deal with trolls and back up the files. So
do you have any experience with code, or is anybody in the community experienced with code? Because I had this idea, you're using MediaWiki, right?
Yeah, actually my code's posted. It's like 23 lines as Docker Compose, so you should check it out. But everything's stock, so
okay,
it's all legit.
You're using stock MediaWiki, correct?
MediaWiki Docker and also MariaDB Docker.
Okay, cool. Because what I was thinking is, I'm not sure what MediaWiki's written. I think it's PHP. But if we can get, maybe we put like a little task force. Like, this is one thing. I guess this is something to bring up too. This is something me and Phil were talking about. It would be good to get your guys' consensus on this too. And then I'll circle back to you, Jonathan. With relationships and some of the issues we've seen, like there's a natural need where use cases kind of come out there. Right now, the relationships is a dedicated arm specifically for use cases and outreach. We were thinking that use cases tend to kind of come from different people right now. Like Shay's working on a use case with a guy that develops communities. And I know Phil's got some use cases and other people. We were thinking of developing kind of like a task force when there's, a use case that comes out, there's a point of contact, and then they can bring in, certain developers, and then it creates like a group that gets disbanded, obviously, when the use case is done, so that we don't have a dedicated arm for it. And we can kind of have, a task force that's created for that. And that's the reason I brought that up, Jonathan, is to bring that back. Maybe we could form a group, a task force for the MediaWiki with some developers on it, and we can start hacking at it, because we could really decentralize MediaWiki. In a way, my ideal idea was that instead of having like super admins and server stuff, we can essentially have like Nexus authenticate some of the data changes, right? We can even take each page and have a register that's associated with it, or a checksum of that register. And then the people that have contributed to that specific page become voting members of that page to accept new information in, because MediaWiki works, but if you've seen Wikipedia, it's become highly centralized. It's hard to get your edits in. For the meantime, obviously, we have some level of centralization that we need to obviously deal with. But, if we could decentralize it with the technology that we have right now, and that could turn into a really cool use case as well. We could use, the Nexus as a decentralized login, and plug that into the backend. I'm happy to help on that if you want. So if we want to start kind of like a task force,
interrupt you,
we can get people involved. Do you like that?
I just want to say that, like, for right now, I know I haven't been involved publicly. You can check the record. I committed 2 years ago. I read the API, and I added the word trust. It's actually quite funny. I built trust 2 years ago by contributing, and that's why I joined. I just want to be quick. I'm trying to do the wiki. It's what I'm passionate about. I made 60 pages, and I believe right now I'm going to take it seriously and study the failures and successes of Wikipedia and others. And I need to form my own regulations. But right now, Nexopedia.net, the domain, is backed by my word and my trust account of 2 million, my trust score, as well as my continued involvement unofficially. This is a community project with a community artwork logo, and it is a check against the DAO officially. It is for the community.
Cool. Well, the only thing I just say is, like, let's get more people involved on it and see how much we can decentralize it, whether that's architecturally or, with, more people being involved and, things like that. That's the only thing is just, mitigating those risks, like the trust chat's going to help with that too. Cause like, as you've seen, we've had, lots of people make fake accounts and, it's kind of created, I guess, somewhat of a guardedness in the community, which is good because we need to be on guard against that. I mean, if you look at Twitter, right? Who knows how many of those are bots? I mean, we've had AI accounts coming into the community, like, who knows who's real or not anymore. So I appreciate you speaking up and, sharing your voice and your perspective on it. I mean, for the record, all the content that you've used lifted from the website, that's all open source. It's on our GitHub. So it really, the only thing that you just have to put content provided by Nexus.io at the bottom of it. And that's just to create backlinks so that if people use it, it'll start help raising our search rankings for Nexus.io. And then, the logo is obviously open source and everything, and you guys can do whatever you want. It's community driven. I just, if there's any sort of concerns people may have or whatever, maybe there's some things that you could do to help, demonstrate and verify, because, part of building trust is in the ability for us to verify one another. So, that's the only thing that I would recommend in that to kind of help, make sure that we all know and verify each other. And it's a good thing that we have people kind of on their toes and making sure that we know who is who and whatever. But I think we do need to work on as a community and developing, processes in order to verify these things and, protocols so that, we don't run into these problems in the future. Otherwise, we're just going to always, be in paranoid fits of wondering who's who and what's what and everything like that. But we really appreciate you putting together the wiki. And, if you want to get my help involved in that, let me know, or, Kendall or Crystal might be able to help. Wow. Or I think Rayan and stuff, like some interactions.
I think it's good to have a separation. There's already admins, but the point is I'm a tech guy. I added YouTube YouTube embedding and the multilingual tech. I'm doing the tech stuff. I don't want to do admin stuff. There's already 4 admins on the site. The point is, I'm not going to try to influence anything. I'm paying for this wiki, and the next person who wants to make one, compete with me and show me that you can set up your own wiki and copy mine. I'll give you the pages, and I will gladly take mine down and start adding to yours. But it's not. Well, I'm not an admin. I just pay for the server. Like, I'm not gonna. You can see the log, and I don't plan on changing the pages. Even I don't want to edit the pages. I want to add features to the site.
So let's plan on then. If anybody in the community is interested, and you are in agreement on this too, Jonathan, let's put together a little task group, a little working group for the wiki, so we can get more people involved in developing it, and see if we can tie some of that into Nexus as much as possible, so that we can kind of decentralize some of the administration, rather than just relying on a centralized database and a server. And then that'll be really cool because we can develop kind of an open source framework for wikis in the future, which I think will be really important for freedom of information. We'd be able to see updates based on the register history and everything like that. I think that'll be really important. So I take this as an opportunity that we can work together to kind of develop and decentralize the media wiki framework a lot more, and that I think will help other people feel safer and what's what and everything. But
yeah, I agree. I don't want to take any more time. I just want to say that I'm here and I'll answer any questions. I don't have anyone blocked, so that I won't block anyone. You're free to ask me anything you want, and I am willing to run the site.
Cool. Anybody have any questions for Jonathan about the media wiki? This would be a good point to start discussion about this. If anybody has any. So Sohan, did you want to air anything out and discuss anything at the moment? Society? No questions? Okay. And do not end right away because I'm trying to record and the first part was broken. Okay, I won't end the video, Cat. Well, honestly, do not understand what it is. Maybe a small intro. I guess Stain, Mr. Wu, is asking for a small intro. Would you mind providing a small intro to him, Jonathan? Kind of a little bit of a repeat about the media wiki.
Yeah, so basically my name's Jonathan Boutsakaris, and I'm a developer, and I'm doing this as a volunteer because I feel that I need to step up and do my part to spread the word of Nexus. So I've made what I can term as a collaborative site. The only contributor I've had is Arwin, is the only person I've met in real life in Tulum, Mexico in 2020. and he gave the artwork that's on it. Other than that, I've written 60 articles under the name Big Baby Boots as someone without any privileges except making a username and password, and anyone is willing to contribute. I plan in 10 days it's going to be the most comprehensive source for Nexus information as a check to encourage other people to spread knowledge information as well.
Cool. Thank you for that. Does that make sense to you, Stain? Let's see. Chakov in manga, there's adventures and they join guild to make a job together. In guilds, there's quest board with rewards. What if Nexus could have something similar so community newcomers could see the necessities that need Nexus? That's a good idea, Chakov. Maybe if you want to start developing that's something we could totally do. We could develop, a nice bounty list of things. Maybe, after this, we can start kind of brainstorming as a community of some things that we think are the highest priority that we can start developing. And then that way we can start to figure out, okay, well, does this require these developers and this and that? And then we can start developing, little task force groups that are, somewhat, driven for each specific individual task. And then, as I was saying earlier too about the use cases, there very well may be a reorganization depending on how, relationships is handled. That arm may get regenerated. I believe there's a report going to the jury right now for a verdict. But if you guys want to kind of continue this discussion after this video call, if you guys like that idea, as far as to be clear, what it is again is when there's a use case, there will be usually a person in the contact that establishes a contact that develops the use case. That person in the point of contact will then, publish, hey, I'm working on this use case in the community channel. Is there anybody that wants to get involved? I need a developer or a content writer or whatever. They'll create a task force, and that task force can be people from other arms, and that task force will be dedicated specifically to that one use case. That way we can decentralize use cases, not isolated to one specific arm, but they can be, basically small groups, separated, by different people. And that way, we don't have like all these eggs in one basket. That's one thing I noticed, business development, for instance, with Brian Venna, they try to run off with all the use cases. So if you have one person that's a point of contact for all the use cases, it can get messy. So this will be essentially a new algorithm where, we adjust that. And if this works well, we obviously put it in the Constitution for how we handle use cases or specific tasks. But essentially that's the idea that Phil and I were talking about yesterday, is creating kind of a task force associated with a use case that's primarily focused on that use case. And, there's needs for, a developer sometimes or a content writer or anything else. So if you guys want to start that discussion and continue that discussion to see if you like it in the main community channel, we can put a poll to see if that's something that everybody agrees and we want to do. And then in the case of that, then when the verdict comes back from the jury based on relationships, we can see kind of what happens there. I know, Chris, you're in relationships, and then we have Naiso and Phil is in relationships, and then I think Guillermo and Gabriel. So once all of that plays out, we'll figure out how to do that. But that's kind of the way that we've been thinking more recently of how to handle that. So if you guys want to continue that, and we'll get some consensus on if that's how we want to do it. We can do the same thing for your idea you just had, Jakov, with developing a list of things for newcomers to come in and know what to do. Because you are right, people don't always know what to do. We come in and be like, hey, like, yeah, it's community driven. What do I do? So as the community may be working on these wish lists, I guess we could say, of like different things that Nexus needs. And, that can be kind of a list that, goes in with a directory so that people, can come in and, we can make them bounty based, or we can make some of them voluntary based. And that I think will start inspiring a lot more, people getting involved and, doing things like you're doing, Jonathan, taking things into your hands and seeing things that need to be done. That's another thing to do. But I do recognize that we're not all those types of people. Some of us just like to, execute tasks, and some of us are the ones that figure out what needs to be done. So I think as a post follow-up to this call, we should all start that discussion and see, what are the things that we know Nexus needs the most? What are the primary things that we want? And then we can generate that into a nice list. And then from that list, they can create different task force for that can be, invited essentially. And then they can follow the DAO model where you have, the working group, and then somebody's elected the chair, and, that can follow quarterly. And then these would be temporary groups that would be disbanded essentially once that task is completed. And then that way, you'd create more decentralization and isolation, which will help in containing some of these potential problems in the future. So does anybody else have any anything else that they'd like to discuss, or are we about ready to close? Cool. Mr. Wu's working on the DAO tool concept to be very useful for everything. I agree. Think about, on the DAO tool concept that we can, that task force can be one of those things. And with 7.02, when we release the global DAO, I'm going to be having voting systems built into it too. So a lot of the stuff that's happening right now is a manual process, but that's going to be automated on code, such as, let's say, an ARM goes up for review like we're having right now, that would be a freeze of the funding until that review is completed. And that would happen all cryptographically. So I'm going to be developing an API toolkit for that too at 7.0. So if you start developing, some ideas right now of, different tools, that can also, elucidate things that we want the core protocol to be able to maintain too for those specific tools. So that would be, I think, really valuable if you wanted to keep up with that. And yeah, you keep it moving in the community. So any approximate estimation for the sign in with Nexus feature to launch dApps? That's going to be one of the first features that I work on for 5.2. I've already set up the new authentication system where it supports a local session. If you've noticed, Sohan, it's sessions create local. So you'll just do sessions create remote. And that, it's not too complex in order to do it under the hood. I've set it all up. So, if you think that that's a more pressing feature, we can break up the 5 series into 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, which might make sense. I think we've talked about having more periodic frequent updates. So it may make sense just to do kind of a login with Nexus is maybe even a post 5.20 and then 5.21. We could do other revisions, but I'll kind of look into, what are those? If you guys want to start discussion, Sohan, it would be really valuable if you guys could kind of look at the features that we have, and if you guys could start voting on what features that you think are the most important features to come out and more immediately. That will help me know what to prioritize my time with in the development of the core too. So I guess that would be another post follow-up homework for you to do, Sohan, if you don't mind doing that. Since you're a developer too, that would be really great for you to kind of give your perspective on that. I think it would be really valuable so that we can, make sure. And then also for the future, if you have a bug and you're a developer, you feel free to reach out to me if you need that bug to be put up as a priority. When you mentioned that you've been waiting and holding off on the indexing issue, I fixed it because that was something that was kind of sitting behind the Precision T class. So, I tend to prioritize what's fun to me and what I feel is the most important. But, more people have, more perspectives as well. So just make sure to speak up if there's anything that you feel needs to be ameliorated or improved. And I'll make sure to adhere to that. So I think it's just about good, unless anybody has any final questions for the AMA. And then I'll plan on doing another one in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. We can do kind of a follow-up on all of these things. And, based on community discussions, we can do it as kind of a review of, hey, these are the things that we discussed as a community. Here's the follow-ups. Here's our list. And here's all the different things that we're going to be working on. Here's their progress reports and stuff like that. And then, hopefully too, we can get more people doing these AMAs. Maybe it makes sense to do updates as video chats here, because I kind of like how it's interactive. And then, Kat, you've been recording it. So once we figure out how to record this one, then we can just upload that onto our YouTube. It may make sense to do that rather than Zoom, live YouTube. I kind of like the interactive element of this. So it was cool. First time doing this. So yeah. I guess in closing, I appreciate everybody. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I'm happy to answer them. Criticisms too, feel free to do that. But let's try to remember that we want to keep our main community channel clean. We want to make it, a nice place to be. So let's try to focus, in the main community channels on like consensus and Nexus related matters. Let's use it as kind of our main deliberation channel. And then, if there's criticisms and concerns, do it in the concerns channel, or, if you need to know more information about what an ARM is doing, Lexi, she's your point of contact. I believe she was voted the chair, or you can reach out to Phil. Phil's the ambassador focus judge. Like I said, if you see something, speak up when you see it, so that we can make sure that we get problems solved as quickly as possible. We don't let them run longer than they need to run. And then I think we'll help everybody feel a lot better about how everything's progressing, and not let it kind of build up to a point before we all, So again, thank you everybody. And I look forward to the next time.